Hello, Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments, and today I'm going to talk about why pop culture spirits and deities are actually viable spiritual beings to work with. Sometimes when I talk about pop culture magic, one of the responses I get is, well, your pop culture spirits and deities aren't necessarily even spirits and deities, they're just fictional characters, and on top of that, they haven't been around as long as Deity X. Well, that's true. Um, the pop culture spirits and deities that are beings that were created in the 20th century for the most part, or maybe even in the 21st century, very recently, whereas the Greek gods have been around for thousands of years. But I want you to keep something in mind. At one time, those Greek gods weren't there. Blasphemy, you say? Well, maybe they were there, but I want you to bear in mind that nobody knew they were there, and that the only way they became there was that they revealed themselves to somebody, and then they developed a mythology around them, and they became the pop culture of their day. You might say, well, okay, fine, Taylor, maybe I accept that, but the fact is they're ancient, they've been around for a long time, and so they have more power. And I'm going to say maybe yes, maybe no, because here's the thing. They have been around for a while, but they've also gone through a long period where almost nobody was worshiping them or doing anything with them. Yes, they were, you know, reading Greek mythology and sharing those myths, but they weren't necessarily doing anything more than that. And I think that part of what makes any spirit or deity viable is the active work that people do with them. Um, you know, the thing is that when we work with deities and spirits, what we're doing is we are giving them our intent and our belief, and there's a symbiotic relationship there. To some degree, they rely on us just as much as we may rely upon them. Now, a lot of times people don't want to look at it in that way. They say, well, these beings are objective, etc., etc., but if they're objective, well, why do they need us? Why do they need to interact with us? Why do they need our worship? And looking at it in another way, I'm an objective human being. It doesn't change the fact that I need to eat food. It doesn't change the fact that my existence relies upon other beings in order for me to continue to sustain that existence. The same is true for the gods. So let's just be brutally honest about that and not pretend otherwise. Now, getting back to the viability of pop culture spirits and deities, well, yes, they've popped up in the last year, or year, no, not last year, the last century or so. What makes them viable is that there's a lot of intention and a lot of attention going toward them. People are interacting with them. And in some cases, people like myself, oddly enough, are saying, hey, here's contemporary culture. I can connect and relate to this, and this is something that I can work with. And consequently, they're working with them in a manner that is useful for them. So Doctor Doom, for example, might be a very relevant pop culture spirit to work with because he's something that I can relate to. He's something that has some context and grounding in modern culture, and that's something that I can work with better than, say, working with an older deity. And that's why sometimes people do end up working with pop culture spirits. Now here's the interesting thing. If you look at the Greek gods, they've they've done a good job of inserting themselves into modern culture. And why have they done that? Because hey, it's another way for them to get out there and connect with people, and it's a gateway to get people access to those older, to the mythology, and to the spiritual practices, and to the people. Now, people who are purists may be dismayed by the fact that Percy Jackson and the Olympians, or whatever other version of pop culture out there, doesn't faithfully portray the Greek gods as they were. But again, we're dealing with modern culture, and part of why that change has occurred is that people are trying to make the Greek gods relatable to modern culture. Nonetheless, don't be surprised when kids who watch Percy Jackson, for example, end up doing a lot of exploration around the original Greek gods and learning more about them. My point is that pop culture spirits and deities are viable because of the intention and belief that is given to them by people. It may not be the same type of belief that someone might say, well, I believe in Zeus. Zeus is a being in my life. It might be, oh, I've read these stories by Harry Potter, and during this time that I was reading these stories about Harry Potter, I really believed in those characters. I got sucked into that world, and that world felt more real to me than the regular world. But that's still a form of belief. It's still a form of interaction. So that's, in my opinion, why pop culture deities and spirits are viable to work with. Have a comment, leave one below, and thanks for watching, and if you found this video useful, please subscribe.